Welcome to Changing Higher Ed, a podcast dedicated to helping higher education leaders improve their institutions, with your host, Dr. Drum McNaughton, CEO of The Change Leader, a management consultancy that helps higher ed leaders transform their institutions through holistic approaches to accreditation, institutional governance, strategic planning and implementation, university academics and operations, change management, leadership and culture, and marketing, positioning, and branding. Now here's your host, Dr. Drum McNaughton.
Welcome to the 28th episode of Changing Higher Ed. We've got a special treat for you this time. We just came back from the Transnational Association of Christian Colleges and Schools, TRACS. They're an accreditation body that works with Christian institutions of higher ed. And we met up with three people while we were there. Dr. Rill, Chief Academic Officer at Veritas Baptist College, Dr. Bryan McCabe, Academic Dean at Bakke Graduate University, and Steve Hase, Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer at Southern Evangelical Seminary. All three of them were kind enough to talk to us after the conference, and we wanted to discuss with them what their key learnings were there at the conference. So here we go. Our first guest is Rill, who is the Chief Academic Officer from Veritas Baptist College in Indiana. Ann, welcome to the show. Glad to have you.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So I just came back from the TRACS conference where I met Ann, and they have probably 80 to 100 different colleges that they accredit, and they're actually growing very quickly. Ann was there. She is the Chief Academic Officer at Veritas Baptist College. And now, Ann, you said the conference was very, very helpful for you. What were the key learnings that you had?
Oh, wow. There's so many things. First of all, I love the community of this group of TRACS. A lot of times there's competition among colleges. And because of that, we don't share often with each other. And that's just the opposite in TRACS. So one of the key learnings every year is just the importance of networking and developing relationships with these other institutions and their leaders. We found that to be very beneficial to our college over the years. So every year I look forward to that and find things just through my interactions on an informal basis with the other college leaders to be helpful.
Great. Were there any particular sessions that really did it for you and said, wow, this is something I've got to bring back to Veritas?
Yes, there were a couple actually, and they both seem to focus on the same thing, but from a different point of view, and that's the great need for mentoring. And we find this to be a real challenge in an online institution. And it's always good to come away from a workshop feeling confident that we're on the right track, but it's even better to know that there's things that are provided to us that will help us to continue moving forward. And so we saw this a lot. Probably the workshop on transfer students was one of the most helpful to us as an institution. 51% of our student body right now is made up of transfer students. And we know that among nonprofit schools in this past year, the average number of transfer students, the average percentage of transfer students who actually completed a program was in the 30s. And so that's a pretty low percentage. And we are currently at 41%, I believe. Might be a little higher than that as far as our completion rate is for our transfer students. So it was encouraging to know that we are a little bit above the curve there. But it was just great to find things that we can do to help our students more in that area. One of the things that they talked about was removing barriers, as many as we can, for transfer students coming in. For example, being more accepting of transfer credits. We already try to do this, But I think sometimes every college can get in their mind that they are an Ivy League school and that they have higher standards than any other institution. But understanding that so many students will be transferring throughout their college career, it just makes sense to make that transfer of credit process as easy as possible and as beneficial to the students as we possibly can.
And that makes perfect sense. The statistics are that the millennials and the Gen Zers are going to have 9 different careers, not jobs, but careers in their work life. And so why wouldn't students be doing that same type of thing in their college experience as well? Now, you guys you have graduate programs as well as undergraduate. Does the transfer credit work a little differently between undergrad and grad?
It it does. On the undergraduate level, we are probably more open to receiving credits from schools that may not be accredited, but who have teachers with the appropriate degrees and are offering a solid program. Among Christian colleges, accreditation is fairly new, and it's been around since the 90s. And colleges and Bible colleges have been very careful, wanting to choose an accreditor that has the same worldview as they do, and TRACS offers that. And so we know that students, especially students who maybe started their education many years ago, may not have those degrees or those credits from accredited colleges. So we do our best to accommodate without, losing any integrity in doing so. On the graduate level, it's the same thing. One of the questions we're often asked is, can a student jump into a graduate program if their undergraduate degree was unaccredited? And we do allow for that. We look at that degree, we see where maybe there are some deficiencies, and we may ask students to pick up a few courses on the undergraduate level before jumping into our program. But we do our best to accommodate there as well. We are more picky with credits that transfer into our graduate programs for sure. And with both programs, students need to complete at least 25% of their program at Veritas in order to receive that degree.
Well, that's a very liberal transfer policy, and I commend you guys for that. As you said earlier, not everybody's an Ivy, and so folks, especially what's now known as the post-traditional students, which make up 74% of all students out there, they're coming back to school to complete their degree, to get a new job, or to get more money in their current job. And what you're doing is you're help satisfying that need. Tell me a little bit about Veritas. I know you just, from our previous conversation, you guys just swapped to an all online model. Tell me a little bit about that and how's that affected your enrollment?
Absolutely. Well, Veritas started out as a Bible Institute back in the 80s. And in the 90s, we became a full-fledged college, received our accreditation actually in 2011. And when I came on and started working at Veritas, it was 17 years ago, I think that was, 2004. When I came on at that time, we were just starting with some distance education. We offered courses in Fredericksburg, Virginia, which is where we were located at the time. And we offered courses on campus, and it was always a small group. I think we maybe got up to 35 a night. But what we started doing is providing video conferencing using the Polycom system. We had 3 campuses. At first, each would have 1 or 2 cameras, so students could get 1 or 2 courses basically a night. We were all evening classes. And by the time we ended with our Polycom system, I don't even remember the year, but we were up to 17 churches up and down the East Coast that would host classes for us. And basically, they were just providing a means for students to come in and get that information live. It was during that time, though, that we realized that there was a need for a little more flexibility in the way we delivered our courses. We actually would videotape them and would save those, and we would send those out to students, which got to be overbearing. Of course, as your student population grows and more are wanting the flexibility. So we moved to Adobe Connect so that we could get into the homes of our students and they could join us one-on-one there rather than going to a specific place. And from there moved into Zoom, which works very well. However, over time, we saw our students continuing to be drawn to the online course with the asynchronous lectures rather than being live in the classroom. And so we made that switch as well. In fact, the year before we made that switch, we offered students the ability to choose either the live session or the recording, and everybody did the same work online. And by that time, all of our students had gravitated pretty much to online, and we only had 4 students coming to campus. So we said, okay, we're done with traditional school here. We're going completely online. So now we professionally record our lectures. Many of them, or those that are not yet professionally recorded, our teachers have access to Zoom where they can record and upload those to the students ahead of time. I'd mentioned earlier about mentoring. When we made this move to online education, our instructors and professors who've been with us for a long time were concerned about their opportunity to interact with the students and to mentor. As a Bible college preparing young people for ministry, that was very important to them. But you ask any of them today, and they will say that the online environment provides much greater opportunities for mentoring than the traditional classes did. In a traditional class, you are interacting with your students, but that one-on-one time, you might have 10 minutes in between classes to do that, or you'd have to schedule a time for them to come and meet with you. But now that courses are being pre-recorded, our instructors have all week to just be online with the students, answering individual questions, meeting with them via video conferencing, and just guiding them as they try to practically apply what it is that they're taught in the classroom.
That is a great example of how online education can be more effective for certain demographic groups. And thank you for sharing that with us. So we are about at the end of our time. Ann, I want to say thank you. Anything else you'd like to add to our conversation, or anything else you'd like to talk about Veritas before we sign off?
Sure. I'd like to just say 2 things. As far as the mentoring, one of the and these conferences, getting together with others from our group who've attended the conference and fleshing ideas out has been great. And another thing that we've done in the way of mentoring that we are doing is creating a voluntary group for financial planning for our students. Our CFO is actually taking charge of this. Of course, we see students today with incredible debt from loans, and we do our best to discourage loans if possible, and try to help students find other ways to pay for college. But we are setting up a voluntary group on our LMS that students can join, where she'll share tips on budgeting, how to avoid loans if possible, and planning for life beyond college. She'll share podcasts as well as other helpful links and answer questions that students might have. And we're hoping that this is just another way that we can mentor students, and that we can help them avoid some of the pitfalls that others have fallen into.
Well, that's great. Well, Ann, thank you so much. We've had Ann, who's the Chief Academic Officer from Veritas Baptist College out of Indiana, with us. Ann, thank you so much. It's been great to chat with you today.
Thank you.
Bryan, thanks for joining us on the show. Just came back from the TRACS conference. What did you think?
I had a great time at the TRACS conference. I met so many interesting people from different parts of the higher education world. Some schools were just getting started and exploring what accreditation looked like, and others had been further down the road than our university. So it was a really diverse group of people that were there, and just a great group of speakers and workshop presenters. I had a great time.
Oh, that's great to hear. What did you have any real big takeaways? I mean, things that you can bring back to your university, Bakke Graduate University.
Yes, the biggest takeaway for me was the importance of having everything that we do at our university connected to great strategic planning and vision that everybody in our organization, all of our stakeholders, are lined up with. And it sounds like a simple statement for me to say that, but when you're at the TRACS conference, you realize how much work actually goes into that process of getting everybody, faculty, staff, students, board of directors, and other stakeholders and alumni kind of on board with what is happening. At our university, a lot of people believe in our mission and vision. And while I was there at the TRACS conference, just realized that I need to circle back around, even with some of the groups that maybe have not fully bought into what we're doing, or maybe they're just not sure what's happened at the university. Want to making sure we communicate well, and that we're implementing and assessing and constantly circling back around to make sure that everybody's moving in the same direction.
And that's so critical. Well, we work with universities to help them develop their strategic plans. We have 3 principles that we go by. Holistic thinking, which is looking at the big picture and what's going on there. The alignment of your strategies, your structures, and your processes, and the attunement of your people, your key stakeholder groups, so that everybody's on board for that shared vision, which is so critical at a university.
Yes, I think that third part really stood out to me. Attunement was a big challenge for me to go back again and circle back around. We just went through our 10-year accreditation process with TRACS, and we received a commendation at the university for how much our full student body and faculty and staff and board are moving in the same direction of our mission and our vision. But I know that there's still a lot of work for us to do to fine-tune things. I know that there's many areas we can do better, especially in today's climate. I attended the workshop that you led, and there's a lot of competition out there. And if you're slipping up in any of these areas, there's many other universities that are lined up to work with your students that you're trying to reach.
Absolutely. And, we want to keep those students for us because our experience better than everybody else, isn't it?
That's right. That's right.
So tell me a little bit about BGU, if you would, please.
Yeah, Bakke Graduate University, our main headquarters are located in Dallas, Texas, but our student body is dispersed all over the world. We have students on every continent except Antarctica. And so about 30% of our students are in the United States and Canada. The rest are Asia, Latin America, Africa, Europe. We work with leaders who take master's degrees from us. We have an executive MBA degree and also a master's of transformational leadership. And we have 2 doctoral degrees currently, a doctor of transformational leadership degree and a doctor of ministry degree. So all of our leaders come from many different sectors of society. We have political leaders, business leaders, Christian pastors and missionaries. They all take classes together, and we have a lot of different worldviews and perspectives in our courses. And our faculty and our leadership is kind of dispersed around the world as well. So many of our classes, I guess I'll just say this, we have 2 main ways that we offer our classes. One way is online through using technology such as Populi and Zoom to connect with our global leaders. And then also we have on-site courses where we will rotate our courses around the world to different cities using the city as our classroom. And we will go to a city for about 10 days and do an urban immersion where leaders come in from different parts of the world to study what God is doing in that city, and then go back to their own cities and implement the transformational leadership practices that they see as they study together in those cities. So it's a pretty fun educational model that we have.
It sounds very interesting. And before we came on the podcast, we were talking a little bit how your board of regents are folks that are located all over the world, and they add to this educational experience for your students.
Yes, we have a board of directors that governs the university that meets regularly and we work with regularly. Then we have a resource network called a board of regents that are leaders located in all these different cities throughout the world that are fully behind what we're doing at the university. They work with our students to recruit students into our programs, and then they stay with those students and connect with them regularly as they progress through the program. We'll often bring those leaders in to serve as guest lecturers. We think that what God is doing in places like Latin America and Africa and Asia are actually great gifts to God's church in the United States. And so we'll lean on our board of regents to come and lecture with us and to coach students. This is especially true when we have students who have a specialty that is in a certain sector of society in a certain place around the world, and we can direct our students to our board of regents and say, go talk to them, that person. They will walk through this journey with you and mentor you, coach you, and guide you along the way.
That sounds fabulous. I think everybody should have this kind of immersion experience in going through programs. I mean, we always hear about the ivory towers and how so many professors and administration are not really in touch with what's going on. You're taking this to a whole new level, and that's fabulous.
Yeah, we call it the medical model of Christian theological education. So we try to keep the academic standards really high with great reading materials and videos and lectures. And then we will watch other leaders model the leadership behaviors for us. And then we, for all of our classes, will require the students to write out in their projects that they have due how they're planning to apply what they're learning to their organization, to their personal life, or to their city, to their location, to bring about transformation there.
Well, that's neat. Well, Bryan, thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate your time today.
No problem. Thanks for your work, and I enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise. Take care, sir. Steve, welcome to the show.
Hey, Drum. Good to be with you.
It was good to spend some time with you at TRACS, and just kind of wanted to follow up with you. What were the big takeaways for you? It was a great conference, wasn't it?
Sure. Well, first of all, my observation, you're not merely a one-hit wonder. I saw you in 2017 at the TRACS conference and enjoyed your strategic planning session, and then was able to catch up again this year. And the hits keep coming, Drum. But as far as takeaways, I think there's three major ones, and we can elaborate on that. But one was helping with my own mindset, meeting with peers and realizing we each have our own battles, our own hardships, finding students, keeping students, balancing the budget, raising funds. The mindset is we're not alone in this, and that there's other warriors out there willing to co-labor with us. That really helped. Dr. Alan Pugh's talk one of the mornings was really helpful to me there. A second major takeaway, and it really is for every, you think of this out of most conferences, but TRACS, I think, has done a great job assembling subject matter experts in a variety of fields. And I'll touch upon as many as our time allows. You yourself on the strategic planning side, planning and change, the management, overcoming resistance, how to build institutional leadership. When it comes to, I've always appreciated when it came to kind of the admissions recruiting process. I found John Dysert helpful last year in implementing a data-driven approach to admissions. Some of those, what I'd call KPIs or key performance indicators, just kind of locking in, make sure the admissions team kind of knows what success looks like, knows how we're measuring it, knows it has a diligent reporting approach, diligent measuring approach. It got basic blocking and tackling. I needed to hear that from John a year ago. And fundraising, I know, is a big issue. Do we ever have enough funds? I mean, we're actually at the seminary now preparing for a major capital campaign. And it was nice to have Dr. John Curtis, Christian Higher Education, presenting about donor-centric, mission-true fundraising. Not only taking furious notes, I'll add a few more if there's time, but what's nice at TRACS, their paper, their PowerPoints, their white papers, the resources that kind of inform these breakouts, they are readily accessible, whether it was through the app, we could download the whatever resources they were uploading. or online. I mean, you can do that through the website too. So finding best practices, and we can amplify any one of these, but that was a kind of a second major takeaway. There's plenty of help out there, and some cases all you got to do is ask. Sometimes you do need to scope it and have a commercial relationship, which is certainly understandable. And then maybe the third key takeaway goes to, I'd call it fellowship, finding people who are, also mission-minded, that you can relate to over the years. I first met this gentleman at a TRACS event, but it was actually through ABAC that I was fortunate that he was assigned as a mentor to me. And his name's Rob Hartman. He's the CFO over at CIU. There's so many people like Rob who know a lot about what they do through their life experiences, but are also willing to talk about it and impart that with you, whether it's at the conference itself or it's after the fact. So that kind of fellowship has been precious to me.
Those are great takeaways. I always enjoy the fellowship very much, and I know Rob. In fact, he and I presented at ABAC last year. I've had him on the podcast, and he and I are going to present this year at ABAC, talking about three things. We're going to look at new governance models. Really, the subject is going to be, what can business give to higher ed that will help higher ed get through this transition period that we're in? And mergers, acquisitions is certainly one of them. Governance is a critical area, and then some strategy and innovation around that strategy. So I'm really looking forward to presenting with him. He's such a dynamic person, and you're absolutely right. He is so willing, like everybody at TRACS, they're so willing to sit down and have a conversation with you, talk about what challenges you've got, what they have, and they become a whole extended network for you. I mean, that's one of the beauties of going to one of those conferences.
For sure. I wish I had Rob's hair, and on the TRACS folks, Barry as the CFO is so resourceful and kind of coaching you along the way. There was a workshop the afternoon prior to the formal part of the event, where if you're preparing an application to TRACS, trying to look for what the name of it, they called it kind of an overview of an on-site team evaluation. That's right, preparation of the self-study. That's what it was, and the team there just spelled out very clearly, these are our requirements. These 40 over here, and then the DOE has these other kind of 40 over here. It's plus or minus, of course. And then not only these are the requirements, but here are some steps on how you can demonstrate compliance with these requirements. And so while the whole accreditation process can appear daunting or fraught with where are we falling short? I think there are resources there and clarity of what's needed, and here's some templates for how to do it well. So I think they take a little bit of the fear out of it, a little bit of the mystique out of it. This is a highly service oriented group at TRACS, top to bottom. Well, the way they were on the conference, but the way they help us get ready to be a strong institution.
I agree. And I've always told folks that I work with on accreditation that accreditation is nothing more than a statement of where your institution is at. Yes, there are standards out there that you need to meet, but if you're doing things the proper way, it shouldn't be an issue. I think mentally we always take it as, oh my gosh, we got to go to the principal's office again. What are we in trouble for? It's simple.
Yeah, so it's not a punitive. It doesn't have to be a punitive thing. It's a preparatory and a good point.
The only punitive times I've seen with accreditation is when you're not transparent with them or you've lied to them, or if you do the same thing over and over. It's like Einstein's definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. I mean, I see the biggest challenges with that with the governing boards is you've got governing boards who are locked into doing things a certain way and they don't really have the experience to be on a governing board. They don't understand higher ed. They don't understand what it means to be a trustee of an organization. And then they come on and expect to have that same mindset brought to a university, and it just doesn't work. And that's one of the big reasons I think institutions get in trouble with their accreditor. A
good point. And on that kind of board preparation or board training, I know there are workshops even at TRACS on that, but it helped me to take away some tools on how do I help my board succeed? How do I help them understand their role? Mm-hmm. How do I help them find their board experience so valuable to that point? And I think our seminary which is 26 years old and healthy in many respects and has a very distinct value, which a lot of our institutions do, or most of them. We're about to do a capital campaign. We're thinking of doing a capital campaign. We need to cultivate a culture of stewardship, cultivate some major donors that are sustainable, and there's a basis for that set. But it also occurred to me that kind of going to TRACS helped me realize: are we really ready for prime time to do that? Maybe we need to sharpen our strategic plan a little bit and make sure our board and back to board relations and our seniors team are on the same page before we're going external to raising capital. So it kind of helped me realize maybe we could get there, but there's some strategic plans that we need a little more board engagement on, and also a little more grassroots participation in, and some other culture building things that I think we've come a long way with already, but maybe we should revisit that a little bit before just got to raise another $1 million or so. That kind of maybe back to that mindset point that TRACS kind of helped me do a kind of a gut check, assess, are we ready for prime time? What are the things we need to do?
It makes perfect sense, Steve. You going to the conferences, at least for me, and I think most people, is it gives you an opportunity to step back out of the bubble that you're in. You can take a look at what other folks are doing and synthesize those type of things. You come away with a new idea of, well, we don't have to do it just this way. There's other ways we could do it.
Yes.
So tell me in the last couple of minutes, tell me a little bit about SES. You guys are located in North Carolina.
Well, I'd love to. It's the sine qua non of SES is that we're a place where classical theology, inerrancy of Scripture, we have a high view of God's Word. So it's very solid theology is brought and integrated with classical philosophy, how to reason, how to think through natural law. So we integrate classical philosophy and evangelical theology with apologetics in everything we do. So that's kind of distinct to our brand. And other folks do some wonderful things with apologetics. What SES is known for, and certainly our founder, Dr. Norman Geisler, and co-founder Ross Rhodes brought 26 years ago was this fullest integration. So and therefore we're going to help the pastor, the educator, the government worker, the marketplace Christian be prepared to contend for the faith and lead and have influence in their spheres. As you mentioned, we are in Charlotte. We have a very strong online presence, and we have international students as well as from most states in the union. And we're ready for our next 25 years.
That sounds great. Thanks, Steve. We've been lucky to have Steve with us today. He's the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer at the Southern Evangelical Seminary there in North Carolina. Steve, thanks a lot. Appreciate your being on the show.
Drum, thanks for having me. God bless you today.
You too, my friend. Thanks for listening this week, and a special thanks to this week's guests, Dr. Ann Rill, Chief Academic Officer at Veritas Baptist College, Dr. Bryan McCabe, Academic Dean at Bakke Graduate University, and Steve Hase, Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer at Southern Evangelical Seminary. It was great to have you folks on the show and look forward to talking to you again in the future. Just as a reminder, The Transnational Association of Christian Colleges and Schools, TRACS, is an accreditation body for Christian institutions of higher education. We were there at their conference in November in Garden Grove, California, and look forward to next year's conference in Orlando, the end of October 2020. Until next episode, folks, thanks much.
Changing Higher Ed is a production of The Change Leader, an organization committed to transforming higher ed institutions. Find more information about this topic, along with show notes on this episode, at changinghighered.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the show, and we would also value your honest rating and review. Email any questions, comments, or recommendations for topics or guests to podcast@changinghighered.com. Changing Higher Ed is produced and hosted by Dr. Drum McNaughton. Post-production by David L. White.